Okay, so we are diving into chapter 7 of The Great Gatsby, and I will be perfectly honest. I have been putting this chapter off because I have a love-hate relationship with this chapter. I think that this chapter, first of all, if you haven't figured it out, this is the climax of the novel. So this is the turning point in the novel. We've got the moment of the highest suspense. It's at the end of chapter 7 when this takes place. So for those of you that want to map this would definitely be a Freytag's plot pyramid. It would not be Aristotelian. Remember, Aristotelian is almost always like equal parts of exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. That's why Aristotelian plot pyramids work really well with Shakespearean plays, and not so well with some of the other plays. So this is definitely a Freytag's modern plot pyramid. The reason that this is problematic for me, and we were warned at the very beginning of all of this, I told you guys that Fitzgerald himself said this is a man's book. My favorite author of all time is Stephen King, and Stephen King has done the exact same thing, and that is, for whatever reason, and by the way, spoiler alert, so if you have not read chapter 7, go ahead and read it before you watch this, or just know that I'm going to spoil the chapter for you. For whatever reason, male authors find that a great turning point for them is to sacrifice a female character. And that's what happens in this novel, is we have the sacrifice of Myrtle. And there is an argument that can be said about the idea that Myrtle being sacrificed is Fitzgerald's commentary on not only Marxism and the sacrifice of the everyday person, but for him, the ultimate sacrifice that how women are more victimized than men in this Marxist clamor for success / power / what have you. The feminist critique in me dislikes that, because then women have been reduced to an object. So Myrtle's body being used as a trophy repeatedly, and then her trying to sort of glean back any power, becomes this further objectified idea. But to be fair to Fitzgerald, how else are you going to do it, right? So, he does eventually sacrifice George Wilson, but before that happens, in order to get the ball rolling, he has to sacrifice Myrtle Wilson. So, to give you a sum up of the chapter, just as a reminder of where I'm going with this. Remember, at the very beginning, we have this weird scene, and we're going to talk about how the setting is a symbol itself, and how it's metaphorical for the building of action. We're going to talk about Trimalchio. We're going to talk about I'm trying to remember the name, Petronius, who's the Greek guy, who was the historian guy, who wrote about this. He wrote satires. So we're going to talk about all of those things, but Myrtle's death is the turning point for Gatsby. It's the turning point for Daisy. It's the turning point for Tom, and it changes Nick Carraway's whole understanding. So fair warning, at any point in time I may have to stop the video because I'm waiting for a phone call from my boss, and then I've also got some students that might be popping in on my Google Meet, so just be aware. Okay, so we start the chapter with them sort of in this heat, right? And then they go to this apartment because they're trying to get away from the heat, which is weird because they end up going downtown, and then on their way back to their sort of neck of the woods, Gatsby and Daisy ride together. And remember previously, at the beginning of the chapter, and this might have been a little confusing to you, when they're leaving to go to downtown, Gatsby lets Tom drive his car. So Myrtle sees Tom driving that very gaudy yellow car downtown, and then they go downtown for a while, and then Gatsby and Daisy come back from downtown. Daisy's driving. She's actually the one that hits Myrtle with the car and then keeps going. Gatsby even says to Nick, I tried to stop her, but she wouldn't stop. So they end up going back, and basically Gatsby finds out that Daisy did love Tom, and that she can't be the Daisy that he wanted, the Daisy that never loved Tom, and then was this great victim of circumstance, and that she would have married, you know, Gatsby, and, you know, all of those things. And again, when Fitzgerald starts talking about Daisy not having her own understandings of self, I find that very reductive, but he does address it via Tom. Like, he does address, like, the whole idea of, like, women being just confused little children, right? So he does address that. I'm gonna turn my heater off. You guys know I have my heater on because I'm always freezing. All right, so let's just go ahead and get into chapter 7. So chapter 7 starts off with this reference to Trimalchio, all right? It says failed to go on one Saturday night. As obscurely as it had begun, his career as Trimalchio, so he's talking about Gatsby, his career as Trimalchio was over. So Trimalchio is actually, it's an allusion, and there's a lot of allusions. Trimalchio was a character in Petronius's Satyricon, and Petronius was a Greek rhetorician. He was a Greek playwright. He was a Greek historian, but he wrote a lot of satires. And Trimalchio was a former slave who earned his money through hard work, and who gained some power by getting all of this money. He was famous for, like, lavish parties, and this again is not Gatsby, it's Trimalchio is the story. But the glamour of his exotic feasts was undermined by how garish and vulgar they were. So the Trimalchio's overall story ends with his guests acting out a funeral for his own entertainment. So talk about being, like, gaudy and garish. Like, I'm gonna have a party, but in this party you guys are gonna stand up and talk about, like, how amazing I was and, like, deliver eulogies about me. So it's double-sided, this meaning. So the first aspect of it is that Trimalchio is referenced to Gatsby because Gatsby gained his money via quote-unquote hard work, which we find out in this chapter. The hard work is actually, like, bootlegging an illegal activity in the first place. And then, so he gains his money via hard work, and like Gatsby, Trimalchio is vulgar in his lavish parties. So the parties are so over the top that, like, everyone in Greek society, just like everyone in East Egg society, is like, ew, like, why are you so over the top? It's funny, you know, I told you guys I'm reading this other book, the Vanderbilt book, about the ladies, and the exact same thing happens in the book right as I'm reading it. Like, I literally read the chapter last night. Lady Vanderbilt's trying to make her way into society. In order to get her way into Lady Astor's, you know, good graces, she throws this outlandish party, and it's a costume ball, and it's, like, ridiculous, and, like, Lady Astor, like, is forced to kind of acknowledge her, like, begrudgingly. She's like, all right, fine, I guess you're sort of, you know, you're rich enough to be one of us, but, like, not really one of us, right? So again, it's that layer of, and you could even argue that this is archetypal, is that someone who was born as royalty versus someone who has made themselves royalty through either hard work or, you know, money or inheritance or something like that. Like, that's an archetype, right? So Gatsby is similar to Trimalchio in that they're both rich upstarts. It's a satire of the first Roman century writer, and Fitzgerald actually thought about, instead of naming the book The Great Gatsby, he thought about naming the book Trimalchio. Like, he was thinking about naming it that, but he decided not to. So, I mean, there's so much in that first paragraph, right? And then the fact that Trimalchio's story ends with them acting out this, like, garish funeral scene, you could consider, like, considering what happens later, that this is foreshadowing, right? This could be foreshadowing for what happens later on in the novel. Okay, and then we move down, and it says, only gradually did I become aware of the automobiles, which turned expectantly into his drive, stayed for just a minute, and then drove sulkily away. So basically, he's not having parties anymore. So Nick goes over and he's like, is he sick? And then there's, like, this description of the servants, and they're like, no, he's not sick, he's busy right now. And so we as readers are starting to infer that the servants that he has used to replace his previous servants who were talking about him and Daisy, are probably, like, villains. Like, they're probably criminals. They're probably not very good people. And so we're starting to be like, all right, there's some shady stuff going on here. So again, on page 114, it says, I hear you fired all your servants. This is Nick to Gatsby. And Gatsby says, I wanted somebody who wouldn't gossip. Daisy comes over quite often in the afternoons. So basically he's saying, I don't want people to talk, so I hired them. And then he said, there's some people Wolfsheim wanted to do something for. So now we know, because remember, Wolfsheim's supposed to be kind of like a bad guy, right? So now we know they are probably like not very good people. They're all brothers and sisters. They used to run a small hotel, right? So we're supposed to be kind of like, I feel like those servants are probably not very upstarting people. And then on the next page, they're sitting there and they keep complaining about how hot it is. And the reason that that's important is, remember in Shakespearean plays, whenever there is something bad that's about to happen, the weather's affected, right? So like there's always a storm. Like if something bad's about to go down, there's a storm. It happened in Julius Caesar, it happens in Othello, it happens in Macbeth, like, you know, storm coming, bad stuff happening. So this is similar to that in that the heat is supposed to create pressure. And if you talk to any police officer, they will tell you, because I have a friend who is a police officer, and they will tell you on the hottest of days in the summer, that's when crime goes up, because people just get a little crazy. Like we're like, we can't take it anymore, so we need to do something. So that's what we've got. So just like light creates understanding of like logical world around us, heat creates a type of pressure. So this is, as the action begins to rise, the heat gets hotter and hotter, right? So on page 115, they're sort of complaining about the heat, and they're lying around, and they say they can't move because it's just so hot. And then on page 116, it's clear that Tom is arguing with Wilson. So about the middle of the page, he says, we were silent. The voice in the hall rose with annoyance. This is Tom. Very well, then. I won't sell you the car at all. I'm under no obligations to you at all. And as for your bothering me about it at lunchtime, I won't stand for that at all. So Daisy then responds with holding down the receiver, right? So she's acknowledging that Tom is bullying George Wilson. And that also means that Tom is using his power against George Wilson. And it even says Daisy cynically. So Daisy's aware that this bullying is going on, but she's not doing anything about it. Like she's just like letting it happen. And so Tom flung open the door, blocked out its space for a moment with his thick body, and hurried into the room. Mr. Gatsby, he put out a broad, flat hand with well-concealed dislike. So Tom does not like Gatsby. I'm glad to see you, sir. Nick, make us a cold drink, cried Daisy. So Daisy has her lover in their home after Tom just got off the phone with the husband of his lover. So like their marriage is not going great right now, right? And she's feeling very uncomfortable. And Jordan kind of knows what's going on, right? And so as he left the room again, so Daisy tells Tom to go make a drink. As he left the room again, she got up and went over to Gatsby and pulled his face down, kissing him on the mouth. So in front of Jordan, like in front of the light of day, like she just leans over and is kissing, and Jordan goes, Daisy goes, you know, I love you, she murmured. And then Jordan goes, you forget there's a lady present. Daisy looked around doubtfully. So Daisy's like, there's a lady present? Where? Right? So she does not consider Jordan to be the same class of lady she is, which is ironic because Daisy's the one who is the married woman who's cheating. So here's where the feminist in me kind of cringes. Like, I'm kind of like, So what Fitzgerald is trying to show is that ladies in these very high societies, these like high upper social class societies, were actually kind of the worst to each other. Like they were their worst enemies. Okay, so Daisy does not view Jordan as a lady because Jordan is unmarried, because Jordan is independent, because Jordan makes her own money as an athlete, because Jordan is an athlete, you know. So in Daisy's view, Daisy is a lady because she's married and she, you know, acts like a lady and she's got the money of a lady and she does all of those things. And she calls her low, vulgar girl. And she's kidding, but she's kind of not kidding. So Fitzgerald is trying to show Fitzgerald is trying to show that these constraints against women of like the way that you're supposed to be if you're a lady are silly. And he's trying to show them by saying they're so silly that even ladies have adopted them. However, the feminist critique would argue, and again, if you rebel against this, that's a good thing. You should rebel against ideas. You should say, I disagree with that. Absolutely disagree with it. You should totally disagree with it. The feminist critique would argue that the women in these novels have so internalized the misogynistic constraints against them that Daisy literally can't remove the lens. That, like, of course she doesn't see Jordan as being a lady because Jordan acts more like a man, and therefore she has taken these glasses of like what it's supposed to be, what it looks like to be your gender, to ultimately perform your gender, so much so that she is not able to even see her friend. This is her friend. She's not able to even see her friend in the same equality as her. Right? And for her, that means that she's higher on the pedestal as opposed to Jordan being down here because she's unmarried. Even though Jordan has her own money, Jordan has her own job, Jordan doesn't feel the need to be associated with a man, right? So it's Fitzgerald's attempt at trying to show like the problems of feminism, which is why I think chapter 7 is an example of a male author trying to show how how capitalism kind of defeats the role of women. Like, it makes women objects and it makes them products of their capitalist environment. And that's further noted on the next page on 117, where it's talking about motherhood as a performance. So you've got, this moment where Daisy's daughter comes in and she's accompanied by the nanny. So clearly Daisy's not the one doing the raising of the children. And she says, blessed, and she's got this weird lilting, like, blessed precious. Like, you see that dash, that hyphen in between the words. And she does it again in the next paragraph, the blessed precious, howdy do, right? So when she's doing that, it's supposed to be kind of like she's pausing strangely, and that's what Fitzgerald's trying to imitate. And the reason that she's pausing strangely, and the reason that she like brings her daughter out and displays her and is like, here she is on display, like, look at my little daughter, isn't she very pretty, and says kind of not nice things to her daughter. She calls her hair like dusty or something. Did mother get powder on your old yellowy hair? Like, my mom called my hair old yellowy hair, like, no. So she says these things, and she's doing it because for her, she doesn't have the emotional connection with her daughter. For her, the motherhood act itself is an act. It's a performance. It's truly just her acting like something, and she ends this little performance with, you absolute little dream, right? So this is what I'm supposed to dream of. This is what I'm supposed to want, is to be a mother to this child and to want this, right? And it's just poetry. It's just performance. And then the next part is, how do you like mother's friend? Daisy turned around, so she faced Gatsby. Do you think they're pretty? So she thinks her daughter only understands the world as pretty and ugly. Like, not good or bad, not smart or stupid, pretty and ugly. And that's the way that she frames everything, right? All right, so next page, 118, we've got this moment that Tom is beginning to kind of internalize the pressure that he feels. And it comes out in this kind of like subconscious slip. So it says, I read somewhere, I'm on 118 in my book, 118. I read somewhere that the sun's getting hotter every year, said Tom genially. It seemed that pretty soon the earth's going to fall into the sun. Or wait a minute, it's just the opposite. The sun's getting colder every year. So he feels like things are falling apart, but he doesn't quite know how. And the fact that his wife's mistress, other man, what do you call a guy? Like a woman has a very specific name. If she's the one who is the other woman, she's called the mistress. But like, what's a guy called? That's weird that we don't have a name for that. I feel like we should have a name for that. Anyway, so the other man is in his home. So like, he's starting to understand something funky's going on, right? And then we have some more synesthesia when it says, on the green sound, stagnant in the heat, one small sail crawled slowly toward the fresher sea, right? So it's like a desire for progress. That's a metaphor right there for the desire of progress. But it's not. It's just like slowly happening, just like this chapter is slowly building to this big action. And then at the bottom of 118, Daisy is basically like, let's just do something. Like, she feels the pressure too, so she's just like, let's just do something. And Baz Luhrmann actually captures this really well in the movie. So in the movie part of it, they're all sitting around and they're fanning themselves and they're hot, and like Daisy's just like, I can't stand it anymore. Like, let's do something. So that's essentially what we've got here. And then Daisy said the day after that, in the next 30 years. So she's like, what are we going to, like, what she says, what are we going to do right now? And then she goes, in the day after that, and then for the next 30 years, because she realizes that the situation that she is in is untenable. Like, my lover is standing next to me, and my husband is right over there. Like, and I just saw my daughter. Like, I understand the situation that I am currently in is going to have to change, and it's going to have to change soon. Okay? And then Jordan says, don't be morbid, which again is foreshadowing for what happens later on in the chapter. Life starts all over again when it gets crisp in the fall. So that's a feeling that we have, but actually, archetypally, when we think of fall is usually the beginning of death. But it's hot, insisted Daisy on the verge of tears, and everything's so confused. So when she says so confused, she means, like, emotionally speaking, everything is confused. On 119, we have this, like, exposing of the love to Tom. So on 119, it says, who wants to go to town? Demanded Daisy insistently. Gatsby's eyes floated towards her. Oh, she cried. You look so cool. Right? So she's just like, oh, you are just the cutest gosh darn thing. Just, yes. And then their eyes met, and they stared together at each other alone in space. So again, this idea of them seeing only themselves and like everyone else in the room is gone. And just imagine this for a moment. Imagine that you're standing there. Like, if I saw my husband make eyes like what's described here to someone else in the room, oh no, friends, it would not be a good day for him. Like, Tom knows what's going on. Like, he sees this in front of them. And then with effort, she glanced down at the table. So with effort, she's like, right? So she like, so it's captured in that moment, and Tom witnesses it, right? And she says she had told him that she loved him, and Tom Buchanan saw. So that line I actually have underlined in my book. That is the moment that Tom sees the connection that they had. She didn't say it out loud, but she said it with her eyes. And Tom's like, oh, no, you didn't. No, you did not just make eyes at another man in front of me. I know that did not just happen. So he was astounded. His mouth opened a little, and he looked at Gatsby and then back at Daisy as if he had just recognized her as someone he knew a long time ago, right? So he's like, oh, you're a human. I forgot. Oh, right? So she says to Gatsby, so she says, you're so cool, and then they make eyes with each other, but remember, she doesn't love James Gatz. And it's revealed in the next paragraph, and this is why this is sad. This is so sad, because she doesn't love the man. She loves the image. She loves Gatsby. She loves what he's projected, and like right after they have this like moment of like love and like, oh, they're making eyes at each other, and Tom's like, oh, heck no. The very next paragraph, Fitzgerald, Nick Carraway says, Daisy says, to Gatsby, she says, you resemble the advertisement of the man, she went on innocently. You know, the advertisement of the man. You look so cool, and you look so, you know, put together, and like we're all hot and sweaty and gross and like, you know, but like you just look like you're just like chilling. You look like an advertisement. So she doesn't really love the guy. She loves the idea of the guy. All right, so I'm going to stop the video there because I'm already at 25 minutes. This is probably going to be a 3-parter just because I'm so passionate about this chapter. So just brace yourself because it's going to be a thing. All right, I'll see you guys in a few.